Alright, so this is another draft version of Story Tiles. You can see I'm designing the logo as we speak. And this Story Tiles is not going to be about solo role-playing. I am keeping that for another video as I am still playtesting it. But today we are going to do some painting. Yes, we are going to do a quick playthrough, or actually paint through, of ISS Vanguard. Now, I am not a self-proclaimed big science fiction fan, so I backed this game with just the core miniatures in the game itself, but I have gotten a lot of requests from friends to show how I go about painting my miniatures. Supposedly, I am fairly proficient at it. I don't know. I'll leave that up to you guys. But yes, I will be painting them in the typical Awaken Realms style that is very impressionistic. For the rest, I don't have everything. Like I said, I only have the core set. These are the standees that came with the core edition. I will just be playing with those, but I will also be using them as inspiration for how to paint these little puppies. Now, they are just the gray non-sun-dropped minis. Sundrop is a technique where Awaken Realms basically brings a lot of contrast and color to the minis without making them look too realistic. They're just sort of like very quickly inked or washed and then highlighted. And I will be doing kind of the same in my little tutorial. So follow me and we will begin with the paint through of ISS Vanguard. All right, so now we're outside. We're going to do the first step. And the first step is basically priming the miniatures. So I stuck the miniatures onto a piece of cardboard. You can see here all the miniatures of the core set. And all I use for that is just some regular duct tape. And now I'm going to use any kind of acrylic spray can. You can use an airbrush if you wanted to, but I'm not really big in airbrushing. I just use very basic ingredients and tools. So yeah, and you can use any kind of brand. Here's some green stuff, and here's some Army Painter, but there's a variety of other ones available. I use white and black. There's a method called zenithal where you spray paint first black and then you spray paint lightly white from a certain angle to simulate a lighter sunshiny drop from above onto your miniatures. Now, you might not have to do that for a science fiction game because light comes everywhere or nowhere, who knows. But yeah, that's the method that I'm going to go for. And then just some protective gear. Now, this mask from 3M will not protect you necessarily against the gases, but I do hope to sort of like keep the particles of spray paint that are drifting around in the air out of my lungs. I use some latex gloves and then just a regular goggles to protect my eyes as well. All right, let's get priming. So you kind of want to keep it like roughly 5 inches away from the miniatures. And you might have to like circle around it, sort of spot like little parts that are still uncovered, usually underneath the minis. So now this is not an exact science, and it's just basically to just cover the main spots, the gross surface of everything, just so you don't have to do that by hand. All right, we let it dry for a little bit and then we'll come back with the white. Okay, so now typically you want to spray first a little bit in the distance, just to unclog any kind of paint residue within the nozzle. Because the next step is kind of fine. You just want to do it ever so briefly. You can see that it's not shaked well enough because there's still splatters. Now, for the style that I'm going for Awaken Realms, which is very impressionistic, I'm not too concerned about it. Alright, that should be it. You can see you already have some contrasting going on between the lighter and the darker parts. And now we let it dry and we can start painting. So this is my workstation, my painting station. It's an impromptu painting station because we have guests over in the room that I normally use to paint. So I kind of moved my painting rig up here, so to speak. But yes, let's go through it to see what you could possibly need for painting miniatures. Now, I do not pretend to be any fancy painter. I'm not Valerio. I can't even pronounce his name. I apologize. One of my heroes is Bob Ross. I like to just paint, just for painting's sake, and happy accidents happen. One of my painting heroes is also Bernd from Meet Me at the Table, who just says, slop 'em and drop 'em. His philosophy for painting miniatures is to just get them to the table fast. That is kind of the style that we're also going to go for with our ISS Vanguard miniatures today. You can see I mounted them on caps, which is one of the things that most painters do. Said do. So one of the tips that I want to bestow is just have bottle caps, and you can have bottle caps with a little bit of blue tack. It's kind of like a gummy tack that you can get in the States, but you can also get sort of the white variety in Europe. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah, I have some over here. So I have some white tack, so to speak, and you can get this usually at hobby stores. And the idea is that you take one of these bottle caps and you mount the miniature on the tack, so it stays put, but it doesn't generally glue to it like glue would or super glue. But yeah, so here's a miniature from Chronicles of Drunagor, for instance. And you just put it on there and see, now you can hold it at all angles and you don't have to worry about your fingers getting paint on them or smudging the miniature as you're painting it. Now you can go one step further, and that is what I kind of did with my painting hobby, but I don't do it always, is use this little MacGuffin. And this does not come with a cap on it. I basically mounted it. But yeah, you can basically mount any bottle cap on here. Even bigger ones if you want to do a big miniature. So say that I really had a really big miniature. What I did is I super glued a bottle cap to the inside of a bigger cap, and then you can basically just mount it on there, and presto. Now you have like a little handheld device that you can actually turn around, and you can have your miniature on top without ever even touching it. And that's great. We're not going to be using this, by the way, today, because it's not just the bottle caps that we're going to use, obviously. we're going to need some brushes. And you can use any type of brush, but the mistake commonly is that people want to use really small brushes to get like the fine details, and this is like a 1/5 a zero brush that is for like the finest of details. That is not something that we're going to be using today. That is really if you want to like paint eyeballs or very minute details. Then we have like the slightly bigger one that is the one brush. Now, typically, what people use, now the well, this is like a half brush. This is not to be confused with a one brush. This is not a two brush. This is like a 1/2 brush. So in size, that would actually be smaller than the one brush. What people mostly use is either well, 0 is also supposed to go before the 1. Yeah. Now you know why this is a draft video. Because I'm just doing this on the fly. But this is a 2 brush, and 2 brush is the most common brush because it has long hairs and it has enough volume, so to speak, to actually retain the paint and get it onto your miniature without it drying up before you even reach the miniature. This is often the case with smaller brushes. You can't get enough paint on them, or they don't hold longer within the hairs of the bristle. So, you know, the 2 brush is the way forward, and you can use the 2 brush typically for almost any kind of miniature, no matter the size or the amount of detail. If you just want to get like the base layer on, which is what we're going to do today. Now, these 2 brushes, they have been really worn down. This is a what is this? A 3 brush, I think. No, it's a 4 brush. So this is a 4 brush, and this is a slightly smaller brush. It's a 1 brush, but these bristles have been really they've been really handled fairly roughly, and that is because I use these for the highlighting that I do afterwards. Now, highlighting is a very aggressive technique where you get a little bit of paint on your brush, you dry it off on a cloth, and then you just get like specks of the paint on there. And then you quickly brush it across the higher layers, the raised layers of a miniature, and that's how you get like a highlighted effect, because that paint then resides only on the top layers of the miniature, creating a very sort of lightened effect. I don't really have an example here. Let's see, I'm doing the Chronicles of Drunagor ones. These have not been highlighted. That's why they look fairly dark still. The idea is that with these miniatures, you want the darkness, the darker colors to reside in the recesses to create shadow, and you want the highlights to be on the raised parts to sort of create a contrast with the darker colors and make the miniatures pop a little bit more. These have not been done, by the way. What I did want to highlight, by the way, is the difference between my regular paint jobs. For instance, this guy right here, that is Arcanos, one of the heroes of Chronicles of Drunagor, and the way that I wanted to paint him up is like this. So if you look at him here, I'm sorry for the glare, then you see Arcanos kind of resembles what he's painted here. So this is more of an exact job, which I won't be demonstrating today, just because this requires a little bit more work. Today we're just going to do kind of the slop and drop of Meet Me at the Table Bernd, who does that technique. Big fan of that channel, by the way. You should check it out. And okay, so back to the tools. So these are the brushes that you typically use. Now today like I said, we're only going to use the 2 brush, and we're going to use the 4 dry brush or highlighting brush. Put these back into my handy dandy pencil or paint brush holder. Boy, I have to say this sort of tutorial kind of mode of showing tools is a lot harder than it looks like when you look at YouTube. I'm just trying to keep things within the frame of the image here, while also trying to explain actually how to do stuff with these tools. Okay, so enough about the behind the scenes. Let's continue. With a miniature painting, you might also want to have like a carving knife handy if you have mold lines on the miniature. Now, I don't mean mold in the bad sense of like moisture and that kind of mold. just miniatures are pressed from plastics, and they are in big figure molds, which are like these inverse replicas of the miniature itself, but sort of where the plastic gets poured into and it's liquid, and then it gets pressed. And when it comes out, it has like sometimes these little fine little lines on the miniature that are just manufacturing errors, glitches, if you will. Now, a hobby knife might take care of those little nasty little lines, so your miniature looks, more smoother or more perfect. Now, I also keep a finger file handy, just to file down the rough edges if need be. But like I said, we're not going to really do that with the miniatures today because they are impressionistic, which means they're just sort of to give you an impression of the character. Now, why is that? The reason why I'm not going to paint normally typically as the characters look like is because for this particular game, the characters are aplenty. There are tons and tons of characters that you're going to be playing in ISS Vanguard, and there are, I think, if my memory serves me, maybe 80 or so, 80 different characters, and you just go through them very quickly. So it's not like you're going to be playing the same character over and over and over again. You might have like a team that lasts like a mission or two, three, but they may get injured, they may have to rest. For a variety of reasons, you will cycle through these characters a lot. And so what they've done is they basically assign them a particular station. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, I think this is security. Then we have science. We have, is this recon? I think so, recon and engineering. And there's just a specific color, and they come with rings that you can put around your miniature to identify to which section they belong. So I'm going to use these rings for the base color of these miniatures. And you can see there's 8 miniatures here, 9 with the ship, but we're not going to paint the ship just yet. We're just going to focus on these minis. And there are pairs of 2, which we're going to give that color scheme of these sections. So we're going to paint 2 in light blue, 2 in purple, 2 in pink, and 2 in yellow. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use a variety of paints. Sorry, these are my glasses that I use to paint. They're not necessary if you have good eyesight. I'm slightly older, so I prefer to have like magnifying glasses to actually really look into the detail. I may not even be using this today either because we're not focusing on details. I'm gonna quickly put these aside. I might use this for the video purposes to sort of like highlight the details if that comes up by any chance. But otherwise, that's for another time. I do have a palette. Now you can just pour paint onto, a cardboard surface. I wouldn't recommend cardboard actually, now that I mention it. I would recommend just a plastic palette. If you're going to paint in one session, so maybe half an hour or so, the paint dries up fairly quickly. Like this is all dry already from previous paint jobs. And when you start using washes or inks, it gets even worse because that stuff just rarely comes out. I do wash these every once in a while. Now, I haven't washed these, so you can see that I've been fairly active recently with painting. But you can use this for quick paint jobs. I would recommend, though, that for longer paint jobs or ones that you are going to be working on for a longer period of time, like say for several days in a row, just use a wet palette. The wet palettes are basically kind of Tupperware plastic-ish containers that you can buy for relatively cheap. I think this is a red grass. They go for like I want to say 20 euros, $20. So it's fairly affordable. And the thing is that you can see it here. It holds the moisture inside, and that keeps the paint very fluid. Now, the paint that I've put on here is regular acrylic paint. Now, you can buy bottles of miniature paint. They kind of look like these bottles back here, only these are washes, which are slightly different. You can buy paint like these, and then they come in like nice little dropper with dropper caps, so you can just get like little itty bitty beads of paint. I am kind of old fashioned and I had these tubes laying around anyway. So I just used regular painter's acrylics. And you can see here my whole bucket full of tubes. And these tubes, they come at like $2, $3 each or so, which is generally a lot more affordable and cheaper than miniature paints, because look at how much you get in here. I mean, this has lasted me, I want to say 5 years now already. So I just use these. The only problem is these paints are thicker. They're not meant to be used on miniature plastic miniatures, because that kind of just really obfuscates the details. Like it really gets into the grooves, and then your miniature is going to look like crap. So what I use to sort of water them down is not only a wet palette, but I use medium. And medium is a fairly available type of liquid. You can't really see it here because it's hard to focus. There you go. So this is Ladmium Medium from Citadel. Now you can buy these in these small little bottles, which also gives you a good indicator of how Citadel, for instance, gives you their paints like in a volume, so it's a lot less. But you really just need like really a little bit of this, and then you can add this to your acrylic paints, and it waters it down a little bit. You can see here, for instance, this is not medium from the bottle, but this is the water actually from the pad, because the way that a wet palette works is that it has water in a sponge that you put as its base underneath it. So this is just a spongy kind of a bottom, and then you put like a waxy kind of paper on top to separate the acrylic paint from the sponge. And I just put pennies on top just to sort of straighten it out and keep the wax sheet from curling. But you can see like over time, water is going to seep through, and it's going to mix up with your acrylic paints. And you don't want that to happen too long, because then it really gets really watery and it goes all over the place. So even a wet palette is only useful for maybe a day or two or so, or just for, a 5-6 hour painting session. Of course, I also have water, and I have a cloth to wipe my brushes off. Very essential. Also, I popped open the medium bottle, and what I did is I put like a little game cube in there to sort of keep the lid open, so I can easily dip in there and loosen up the acrylic paints down here, because we're going to need it. Because essentially the style that we're adopting right now is fairly loose, and I want to imitate the style of Awaken Realms miniatures by keeping that sort of that zenithal, that light on the top, dark at the bottom, shady at the bottom. When you look underneath the miniature, you see it's kind of still all dark gray or black even, while on top it's really light. I want to keep that and maintain it, and the only way of doing that is by keeping your acrylics really, really fluid. So let's see if we can maintain that. Now, another thing that I want to make perfectly clear is that the base is going to look like this. It's going to have this color scheme. So even though I have these rings, and these miniatures are going to have that kind of color on them, a different miniature will have this color depending on the section that they're in, I like to separate the miniature, the actual person, from their terrain, from their environment. And the way to do that is to give it a different color. But I don't want basic browns and greens that you would find on Earth, because this, of course, is a science fiction game. So I figured, why not use this color? This is the back of one of their action cards, and I really like this color. I think it's kind of neutral. It fits with all the other colors that go on the miniature, so all these specific section colors, and it separates the person from the environment. And so let's just see how it works. You can't do anything wrong, is my philosophy in miniatures, because even if you paint it up and it doesn't look great, then you repaint it, or you go move on to the um, next miniature, next game. All right, so let's just start painting them up. Now I've done some already. I'm just going to show them here because I want to make clear that this is kind of how it's going to look like. Yes, I'm pointing at you. This is going to resemble the section color for engineering. And for instance, this is recon. So it's a more of a pink base. And I've done these already, so I can show you in a minute how to do washing as well. But for now, we're going to start from scratch, and we're going to paint this up in engineering yellow. Now, the sound of my voice may veer in and out quite a bit, just because I'm not really. This is my second video that I'm filming, so I'm not really adverse in the technology surrounding my painting rig here. Just a thing on the paint, by the way, you can see here the four colors. Sorry, I adopted these colors to the color scheme that I want to emulate. So this is just a yellow with a little bit of orange to do sort of the bottom of the miniatures in a slightly darker color to sort of emphasize that zenithal white on black contrasting that we already got while basing it. I'm going to do the same actually with the base color. You don't have to do this. It's fairly negligible, the effect, but I like to think that what feels right is right. And I'm just going to apply the paint, which has now gotten really quite thin actually, onto the mini. And that's okay. If you think like this kind of looks like crap, that's okay at first because you're only applying the first layer. So how many layers are there, you may ask? Well, it all depends on you. If you enjoy the painting activity, you put on as many layers, fill in as many details as you want. Sorry, I'm really channeling Bob Ross now. If you want to put a little cloud there, you put a little cloud. This tree can grow whichever way it wants to. Go, Bob Ross. It's amazing how well, yeah, I guess he was portraying kind of his own character, but basically a professional painter from how many years ago now? 30, 40 years maybe already. Still has such an influence on people worldwide. There's a Bob Ross. Oh, listen to me. A Bob Ross board game nowadays even. All right, this looks good. This is how fast I kind of did it. Once again, I'm not painting the terrain just yet, but you can see that the details are not filled in with a lot of paint. But the miniature obviously doesn't also look very great right now. But this is just the base color. So we spray paint it first to get we prime it to get like that plastic, that gray plastic covered in black and white, and then we put on a first color, which for me is the base color. All right, so this one is going to be pink. One of the fun things actually of seeing paint throughs from other people, I always like looking at their hands for some reason. Very hand oriented. And then of course, on my own very first own paint through session, I become very aware of my own hands to a point where I can't stop looking at the band-aid on my finger. And it always makes me wonder when I see that on other people, what did they do? Like, how do they injure themselves? How did they cut themselves? Well, not that this makes a fantastic story, but you might be interested to know that just by setting up this whole rig, I actually cut myself on the rig. I just scraped my skin off and thought, oh, that'll be fine. Just a scrape. And then it started bleeding. I was like, oh, okay. That's not going to make for a great video. We want the color red in our paint only, not with human plasma. Ugh. That's not the way to go. As Bernd would say on Meet Me at the Table, that is not the plan. I really recommend that you watch his channel. He has great playthroughs. It's one of my all-time favorite channels to watch if I just want to chill out and watch some dungeon crawl action or watch him paint, because he does painting now as well nowadays. All right, so one of the things that I am now neglecting to do, paying more attention to talking than actually painting, is to give it a slightly darker color in the areas where it's already a little bit dark. Now, this recon fellow, or lass, also has like a jetpack. Typically, I would use that jetpack with the flames thrusting out as a source of light. There's something in miniature painting called OSL, Object Source Lighting, ? And that would mean that anything that gives off light reflects off of the many other surfaces around it. So this blast, for instance, would be like a bright yellow or white even, or maybe because it's science fiction, it would be light blue. And then I would paint that same color, that same light blue, or just brush it very briefly across other surfaces around it, just to sort of create that illusion that it's a real fire, it's a real light. All right, and that is our second miniature. I'm just going to quickly compare it to the one that I did earlier, because the one that I did earlier has a little bit more pink on it, but that should be okay. We're not too concerned about these miniatures because, as with many Awaken Realms games, the miniatures do not matter. Not really. I mean, they look great, and Awaken Realms releases one of the best miniature lines and sculpts in the industry. I think, at least. I think they're really beautiful. Oh, that's really dark. That is really dark. Let's add some white to it. And you can see that there was already some blue in my white. That doesn't really matter. It really doesn't. You're not going to notice that. And also now it's on there. It doesn't matter because you just mix it up. You just add some more medium to water it down so you don't cover up all the differences in black and white. But I just paint right over it. Easy peasy. Nothing really matters. Just like the Queen song. Now what does matter is that she is holding some kind of indigenous fauna in her hand, like some plant. And because it's not part of her, but it's part of the environment, I do want to color that up in the terrain colors afterwards. So now that I have actually covered it a little bit with paint, you might think, oh boy, now what? Well, it doesn't really matter. I am going to go a little bit darker again underneath her. Once again, you're just giving the impression of life and action, not really too concerned about the fine details. Because what I find in board games, let me know in the comments if that's something you do find as well, is that when you're playing a game, you may look at the miniatures at the beginning before you start, or while you're learning the rules and be like, ooh, these are fine looking miniatures. Not these, obviously. These are my own little handy dandy crummy work, but other people's work. And you might think, wow, that looks really neat. But then you just start playing and you lose yourself in the game. And the miniatures really kind of just don't matter. I find myself doing that a lot. Like then I get obsessed about the puzzle of the game or the story of the game. And this channel, which is called Story Tiles, is all about that kind of immersion, that kind of thematic immersion of the story in games. So I'll be future videos concentrating a whole lot less on how to play games. Where's his foot? Somewhere inside the terrain. Yeah, I'll be a lot less concerned about how to play a game or how to win a game, or if the game is mechanically sound, if the rule book is great or not. Well, I might touch upon the rule book a little bit, but I'm more interested in the story behind the game, the theme. What does it tell? What experience does it hope to create? Now, I have the same thing with miniature painting as well. I find that one of the hidden joys of painting miniatures is the story that that miniature that you're painting tells. Like, who is this guy or woman? Like, that's the thing, right? You start looking at it, you start like taking that lens, and you start like, let's see if I can simulate this. And you start like looking at the details, like, oh, this helmet. What elements on his armor or her armor again mean something, have a bigger story to tell. Like, what is that device that they're carrying? Did that person have a good night's rest? Did they sleep well? Did they eat well? What did they eat for breakfast? All these questions. Mind you, these questions don't keep me awake at night by any means or stretch of the imagination. But while I'm painting, I find myself telling the story of the character that I'm painting. And that's going to be a big part of this this channel going forward, is the story of the characters, the locations, the events that occur, the plot, the pacing. All right, so this is the fourth one. That's as quickly as we do them. Now, I have been wondering if I should paint this after all. I do not know what kind of gameplay value the spaceship will have just yet, because what I've understood from ISS Vanguard, it's an exploration game on planets for which you would use the miniatures to move around. And then you have a ship phase, but you're inside the ship and you're doing all sorts of things on the ISS Vanguard. So you're not actually looking out upon it. But who knows? Maybe there's some kind of exploration going on. The thing that I wanted to touch upon is miniatures nowadays are coming out more often with these kind of clear plastic parts on them. And you can't remove them easily. You can if you just broke them off, or you filed them off, or you clipped them off, or whatever, and then stuck them on with some super glue afterwards. But aside from that, if you just wanted to paint the miniature, but you didn't want to paint the clear plastic parts, like I don't really prefer to do those, then you may have seen earlier in the video, you just wrap a little bit of duct tape around them so the spray can paint doesn't get to it. And then you just take it off again and you start painting it. So yeah, so maybe I will paint it up in the same style as the environment. I kind of also like this kind of color scheme because it it resembles space. It has that sort of that light, but also dark, sort of naval blue to it. So yeah, you know what? Let's just do it. It's a miniature. It's going to get played. It's going to get used in a game. Now I don't have to use a bottle cap because it actually comes with its own stand. I just have to make sure that I don't get any paint on the stand. But how hard could that be? Famous last words. Oh yeah. So now, right. What I did want to mention is, what do I do to get this color? So I mixed these 4 or 5 colors together. That's the plan. Who says that? That's the plan. I'm sticking with it. Just gonna remove this brush for now because I don't really need it. Oh, you may have noticed, by the way, I'm not actually even using the 2 brush to apply paint to the miniatures in this case because I don't need to look at fine details. I'm not painting like the visor of this character or the hand, at which point I would be using the number 2 fine tipped, or maybe not so fine tipped anymore, but like brush. I'm just using the highlighting brush as razzle dazzled as it is. Did I say razzle dazzled? I guess I did. Because I'm just trying to get paint on there as fast as possible, and I don't really want to like bruise up the bristles of this brush because this is really for more details and stuff. So I'm not actually using this, even though I said this is normally what you use to apply base paint on. I am just going to use this this worn brush. Having said that, yes, and it also mixes well. It's a good mixing brush for if you just want to like mix colors quickly together to get like the palette that you're actually looking for. Let's just start mixing. When you mix colors, just keep in mind that the more colors you mix, the muddier it gets. It's not per se darker color, but it's ugly. It loses its pigment, its unique color, in which the base paint actually originated from. So you don't want to mix too many colors together. You can quite easily get the color that you're looking for just using 2 base paints, or maybe some white or some black. If you want to make it duller, that's the reason to use black. But you use very, very little. As soon as you use too much black, of course, you get like that muddy, dark color that you're not looking for. You still want it to be vibrant. Now, if you do get it too muddy, if it gets too dark, no worries. You're going to be highlighting your miniature afterwards anyway. So a lot of the mistakes that you make during painting, they are going to be easily corrected later on in other phases. All right, so what do we need? I see this is a blue, but it's not like a pure blue. However, I'm going to start with that and a little bit of gray. That already looks great. That already looks just like what I need. Yeah, I'm just going to do a little touch of purple in there. Just because I do like the color purple. A little bit of white to make it a little bit. And just keep on adding medium just to keep it nice and supple. And it also mixes the color better. Medium is this magical fluid that is essentially the base of every liquid paint. So it's already in paint, so you're basically just adding more fluid to it without adding more pigmentation to it. I think it just needs a little bit more blue. I thought initially it was going to use some green as well, some seafoam green, but I don't think that's the case. I think that's pretty good. A touch of black, just like I said, to sort of neutralize it. See, now you can see like it's getting too dark now already. So when that happens, just stop painting, wash your brush, get that darker color off it. So you just start with a clear brush again, and then just add some white, and you have to just go back essentially and just mix those colors, add more pigment from blue. And if you think like, well, okay, he's now on video and he's making all these mistakes. No, this is kind of how I operate anyway. Like I make a lot of mistakes. Actually, in painting, you don't really make mistakes. You really don't. You're just experimenting. Just experimenting. This is actually perfect. Look at this. oh, this is a good color. And it may not be the right color just for you, in which case I will happily agree and say just keep on experimenting. Find the color that's right for you. I've seen a lot of people that I look up to in the industry use contrast paints or they all have like fancy names nowadays. Uh, Contrast paints. There's what are the other paints called? I forget, but they all like one. Each one has like a fancier name than the next, or than the last one. Sorry, not the next. And to that, I say more power to you if that eases your painting woes. If you find painting a chore, but I also think if you find painting a chore, then don't paint. It's not worth it. Painting should be fun. And if you're really concerned about having miniatures on your table that are gray, then a lot of games nowadays come with the Sundrop method. Sundrop is the term coined by Awaken Realms. And all that it means is what I'm doing right now, which is applying a base paint, putting shades in there of a darker color or an ink or a wash, and then highlighting him. And then you'll get that same contrasted yet colorful miniature quickly on the table, ready for you to play without it looking boring and gray. By the way, I kind of mix my terms together. I'm not a very technical person in terms of painting. So when I say a wash or a shade or an ink, they are actually in the painting community all very different terms and very different results. But I don't care. Not really. I mean, if you talk to a professional, then it's probably best to sort of keep the terminology right so you are actually getting the advice from them that you need. But in my case, we're just painting to have fun. So now I'm actually mixing or adding some more dark blue to it, which was not part of the original scheme. But I'm trying to find like a right color to paint the bottom of the spaceship. Now, and before you go say it, there is no bottom in space. In space, all these sides are up depending on where you look for at it, or where the sun or the stars are reflecting off the hull. That's true. But when I'm playing a game, I'm still looking at it from the top. And this miniature needs to reflect, quite literally, reflect in terms of light. That shade at the bottom and the light on top. Now, if you're wondering, am I actually covering everything? Well, I can reassure you I am definitely not. Why is that a reassurance? Because again, it doesn't matter. You already spray painted it up earlier. And so there's already like this speckled black and white play on the miniature. And unless you look at it with a lens during gameplay, you're not going to notice. Furthermore, we are not finished yet. There is going to be more. All right. So this looks pretty good. Now this color I'm also going to apply to the bases of the miniatures, so it has that same kind of purpley blue space alien environment color to it. Now I have to mix up some more here. Now I'm actually dipping into the water, which is no problem. Water and medium, they're all meant to sort of make it more fluid. The reason why I am adding even more paint to it and more medium and more everything to it is because I need a lot, because I got to cover all of these bases of these miniatures, and there's like 8 of them, so yeah, that works. So on a regular palette, a plastic palette, this paint would have dried up by now. Even if you are quite liberal with your medium or your water, you can also use water, by the way. I'm not sure if I even mentioned that. You can use water to make your paints a little bit, or a lot, more fluid so that they seep into every crevice. Okay, this looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. We're just going to continue doing the bases for the other ones. I have to continuously remind myself to actually do this in the camera. I am such a focus bug in that I completely lose myself in whatever activity I'm doing. I find multitasking to be one of the hardest things in life. In fact, I think I read an article at some point that multitasking doesn't really even exist. That you're just switching very quickly between 2 tasks, 2 or more, very rapidly. I don't know. What are your thoughts about this? Do you multitask? Do you try to do multiple things at once? I think it's also because my interest in doing several things at once is not that great. Like right now, I'm already lamenting the fact that I am doing these miniatures really quickly because I don't get to like examine them and like really look at them and be like, ooh, what is that device? Or what is that fruit she's looking at? Oh, talking about the fruit. I actually need to paint the fruit. Again, this would be a detail that I would normally use a smaller brush for, and definitely not this brush, just because you want to get the separation between the detail and whatever the detail is attached to, right? This case, again, we're looking for this Awaken Realms copyrighted, but not really, impressionistic style. So if the colors flow a little bit from object to object, that's okay. It really is. People are going to look at your miniatures and they're going to be blown away. They're going to be like, whoa, I could never do that. You hear that a lot in the gaming community when they look at miniatures. And really, it really isn't just that hard. It really isn't. All right, I'm going to do the other 4 that I had painted earlier. I will get back to you when they are done, and then we're going to do some washing and get to the next step. We are ready to wash these miniatures. Now, I put them down here, saying that, but I am going to take them away again because washing or shading miniatures is a fairly splattery kind of ordeal, because these washes, for instance, from Army Painter, these are the ones that I use. You got to shake them up Shake, 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 shake. Because otherwise the pigment, because there's still pigment in them, pigment will settle to the bottom. And that's not where you're going to dip your brush. You want to dip them up there. Well, actually, you're not going to dip them at all. You're just going to pour them out. But it's important to shake them up. Now, I shake up the military shader, which is not one that I'm going to use. I'm going to use purple, obviously, for the purple miniature. I apologize for the background noise. There is some good old Irish fish soup being made downstairs, and that is the seaweed in the blender, because we put Irish seaweed in our fish soup, which is probably more information than you need to know. But all right, so blue for the blue miniature. Now for pink, I'm actually just going to go with red, but we're going to water it down a little bit, the red, so it doesn't turn all red. Now the nice thing about these tones or these washes is that they don't act like typical washes that they cover the miniature and stay everywhere equally. They actually seep into the recesses so that the recesses retain the pigment, whereas the raised areas do not. And that creates a really marvelous kind of a shade. In fact, if you're done after this step, then you don't have to continue with highlighting, because they might look great already. They will turn out darker though. All right, and then for the yellow, there is no such thing as yellow shade. Yellow is such a bright color. What I do tend to use is this soft tone quick shade. It's a very light brown, and brown is a good base for anything orange or gold or yellow. Yeah, you'll see it in a minute. All right, so these are the 4 shades that I'm going to use, and then I typically use a wash mixing medium. You can also use that from this brand, Army Painter. You don't have to, though. You could just use regular water to thin down medium. I am going to use it just a little bit, though, specifically for the yellow, or in this case, the soft tones, sort of the brownish wash, because otherwise it gets too dark. I'm just going to use this a little bit with that. All right, we're going to put them onto our really clean palette right now. I did wash them, because if you have residue from paints or other previous washes on there, the active elements in the shades, they will reactivate any pigment that's on there, because any moisture essentially loosens up, the pigment, and then that pigment gets mixed in with this pigment, making a big pig fest. I cracked myself up. No, that's no, but it does mix and muddy the colors. And if anything, the lesson of today is keep your colors vibrant, not muddy, because that will just give it a general muddy look, and that's not what we're going for. All right, so let's do this. You generally do not need a lot of wash. Wash goes a long way. In fact, any kind of product from Army Painter, Citadel, any kind of other company that makes these kind of bottles, this stuff goes a long way. And typically the paints that I use, because they come from regular tubes, painter tubes, I tend to put more paint on my palette than I need, which is fine, because that stuff comes at like $1 a gallon. Like, well, maybe not $1 a gallon, but it's much cheaper than if you just buy these small little bottles. So that's typically why I use them for paint. These washes, I can't really get commercially viable products, because painters, I don't think, use these kind of things. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I I think painters just, they mix up their acrylics or their oils, and they maybe use some medium. They generally don't they don't use this stuff because they don't have to work with reliefs. They don't have to work with raised areas and recessed areas. Oh, I forgot one more thing, because this color, we need a darker version of it. So we could use blue, but then it turns out maybe really blue. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. But I'm going to use some infamous Nuln oil. Shade Nuln oil from Citadel is infamous on the internet for being spilled everywhere. So let's see if we can definitely not reenact that scenario. Because these bottles, they can be hard to open up. Okay, no problem there. Okay, so, and this Nuln oil is just a black wash, essentially. Just going to pour airbrush slightly in here. There you go. See, already it's like leaking everywhere. But that's generally the wash or tone or ink that you want to go for when you're not exactly sure what color you're painting in, and you just want it to be darker. All right. I'm just going to put my regular reading glasses on, because even though I'm not wearing the goggles, because I don't need to look at fine details, I still need glasses to see up close. All right, let's just start with these guys. I'm going to put these back because I don't want this ink to be, like, as I'm applying it, splattering all over other miniatures. That would be somewhat too much of an impressionistic choice. All right. So I put some of that wash medium in here, and as I mix that up, you'll see it gets really light, or much lighter than it was before. You don't have to worry that the milky whiteness of it resides. As it dries up, it just becomes clear. Most of these products that are milky white when you apply them, glue, wash medium, gloss, for instance, all these things, varnish maybe even, they become clear when they dry. All right, so now I'm just going to apply it. And you can see it's already getting a distinctive sort of brownish tone. And to be honest, it looks not great when you first apply it, but have faith that this is going to work. I've done this many times before. Now, if you wanted a starker contrast, if you really, really wanted to hone in on these deep crevices in the darker areas, you could opt to go for a darker brown, maybe even a black, a Nuln oil. I would not recommend that, because that is going a little bit too far. And keep in mind, I'm working under a high intensity light for filming, so that also takes a little bit away from the effect. But once you're in your semi-dark, semi-lit gaming room, munching away on nachos or Doritos, drinking your beverage of choice, playing your board game, you are already going to be in a darker environment where a lot less is exposed to the incriminating light of the day. And that goes for your miniatures as well. So your miniatures are going to look really dark if you make them too dark. So I'm kind of just lathering this on. I'm really just, it's like a mud almost that I'm putting on there. You might actually want to decide to clear a little bit off, especially around like things like the faces or the front details, just to not drown them in wash. Because keep in mind, this wash is going to seep into the recesses, but the more that you have, the less able it is to really disappear from the forefront. Do you know what I mean? Like it's going to just pull up, and like a glass that's overfilling, it will just basically just goop all around and the edges and really like obfuscate everything. So this is good. That is how easy that is. So now that we've done that, we're going to go to the next one, which is the pinks, or in this case, the red. Now, I could add some of this medium, this wash medium specifically to the red as well. I don't know. Let's just see how it goes. Let's see if this. I'm going to try the darker, or the areas down here first. It doesn't actually look that bad. Yeah, I'm going to keep it. Keep in mind, this is going to go into the recesses anyway, and we're still doing a highlighting phase, which, granted, if I were not to do right now after this may be too dark. So if you're just going to paint and wash, this may be too dark to get that distinctive pink feeling. Because look, you can see the difference already. This is definitely a red that's going into those areas. But you can see as you're applying the wash, it's already creeping into the recesses, giving this lovely contrast that you would definitely not get with an unpainted miniature. Or a miniature where you just decide to just use acrylic paint and not use any washes or shades. I believe the difference between a wash and a shade is that the wash does not necessarily creep as much into the recesses as a shade does. A shade is really specifically to get this contrast out, and a wash just generally applies a thin layer of very basic acrylic pigment to the overall miniature, so that the contrast is less, and it's sort of like, it's almost like an ink. Ink is even more dramatic. I have some inks here actually, but I rarely use them because they really color the whole of the surface. And I paint my miniatures to stand out. So I'm not looking for overall bright miniatures that are just generally pink, because that I think it's the same effect of having a gray miniature. Like if everything is the same color, everything's gray, or everything is red, everything is blue, and the same type, the same shade of blue, because this is red all over, and or pink all over when it's done. But I hope to create some difference between the areas that, see, that's a little bit of pigment that just came out of the bottle, and it, yeah, you can see it there. You can see it. You don't want that on your miniature, I'll tell you that. That is not the plan. I really should become careful not to use the same catchphrases as my heroes. Little cloud there, little leaf there. That's the plan. That's the deal. These sayings belong to other people. I should come up with my own catchphrase. Bada bing, bada boom, maybe. I don't know. As I knock the camera. All right, purple next. This is, what was this again? I think this is science? Yeah. This is the science section. Purple is one of my favorite colors. It's vibrant yet dark, mysterious. It's more and more used nowadays, but still, in the overall scheme of colors used for everyday items, it's not used a lot. except when you live in United Kingdom or Ireland. There's a lot of products that have purple as their base color, weirdly enough. If you've ever had Cadbury's chocolate, their color is purple. They're proud of it. It's good chocolate. Definitely like that chocolate. And I'm a chocoholic, so I know my chocolate. I'm getting hungry for chocolate. Forget the fish soup I was mentioning earlier. Dig right into the stash of holiday chocolate that we have going on here. It starts with like holidays like Halloween, where you just retain a lot of the stuff you give out to kids coming to your door. If you have Halloween in your country, most countries do nowadays, actually. People like to dress up. And then it goes over to Thanksgiving, which is decisively American. And may not be so big on chocolate, by the way, more just on turkey and savory foods and yams. But it's definitely all about the eating. And then, of course, you get Sinterklaas, which is Dutch. It's sort of the kids' version of Christmas. And the reason I know this is because I am Dutch. Don't let the accent fool you. I'm married to a lovely woman from Chicago. She's American. My son is half American, half Dutch, but I am fairly Dutch. And I say fairly because I haven't lived there in a while. It's probably the reason why I don't really have an accent. Couldn't even try if you put a gun to my head. I'd be really hard pressed to fake a Dutch accent, but yeah, so Sinterklaas is a Dutch festival where Saint Nicholas and his helper Peter come from Spain on a steamboat, and then they give kids treats. And that's on the 5th of December, which is tomorrow. We don't celebrate Sinterklaas not anymore because my kid is almost an adult. He's in his late teens. But they definitely do chocolate. And the Dutch are also known for their really tasty chocolate. If you ever go to Holland, try one of their Tony bars or Verkada. Very good stuff. All right, he looks good to go. I don't know if this is actually focusing at all, to be honest. I'm below the camera right now. I don't have like a feedback system where I'm looking on a monitor to see if it's actually filming, period. I don't even know if it's on. Let me check. Oh yeah, it's still filming. Down 19 minutes already. Yeah, these paint throughs are longer videos just by their very nature of people yapping it up like I am doing right now while painting and showing you hopefully some tips and tricks how to do it. My purpose again is just to show you how to quickly paint up Awaken Realms miniatures. This goes for all of their games: Tainted Grail, Ether Fields, The Great Wall. Any game of theirs has kind of the same art style, which is very loose and sketchy, and that's kind of how I like painting my miniatures. Were you to ask me to paint a more realistic miniature for like, I don't know, Descent, Legends in the Dark or something, or I don't know, Forests of Radgost, for example, then I would probably paint them with a lot more, I want to say love and care. That's not technically true because I do love painting. I love, and I spend a lot of time painting, but I wouldn't say like I put a lot of care into it just because I want to get them to the table. I want to paint and play. That should be my slogan: paint and play. And so I very rarely spend the time futzing around on the miniatures to get them to just the right level of quality to win like a golden or crystal brush or whatever those awards are called that they give out to miniature painters. I don't really care about that. That's like a whole art together. That's like comparing Bob Ross to like Michelangelo or something. Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, Bob Ross was his own type of genius. And that's not to say that he had no talent. He had tons of talent, obviously. I mean, the guy was really good at what he did. Spoiler alert, he's no longer alive anymore for those people interested in looking up Bob Ross. But you can see his videos everywhere. But there's a lot of people like me in the industry, in the gaming industry, who just enjoy games, enjoy their board games, and they enjoy painting as a hobby. It's calming, it's soothing. That's why I compare it to Bob Ross or Bernd from Meet Me at the Table. And you can see as I just dab the gnome oil on, it just automatically flows into all those bits and pieces. Well, it's another good reason to actually have like bits that you're not going to paint, because you can you can hold them there without getting your fingers all dirty. But yeah, gnome oil is like, it's like magic sauce. Magic sauce for your magic miniatures. Just don't try to force those bottles open with too little finesse, because then before you know it, your whole painting station will look like this miniature. And not in a good way. A number of photos you can find online of people who have spilt their gnome oil bottles. It's numerous. All right, that's what we're going to go for. I hope that shows a little bit. Let's see, I'm not even in. There you go. That's what we're going to go for. All right, I just need to do the bases. Let's see if these are dry. No, so these are not so dry. Like that's another reason to have these on bottle caps, is just to hold them like this. Yeah, because when you work with washes and shades, obviously it's going to be a lot more wet. It's going to be wetter for a longer period of time. In fact, when I'm done with this, I'm going to pause filming again, just so I can give these some time to dry. I might come back on this tomorrow. Of course, for you, the viewer, you won't see the difference. You'll just see these magically dry up before your eyes. It's the magic of video. I've always wondered if this makes for good viewing or not. If you're still with me, I guess you've answered my question. For you it is. Other people may have already skipped through this just to see the end result, or just tune off altogether thinking, who is this crazy fella? Just doing his own homebrew paint through. And there's even more people who are probably wondering why I'm doing a paint through at all, because my first video of story tiles was about my own version of a solo RPG method, a method to play solo games by yourself when you don't have a group to get together or a DM. Now, there are methods out there, solo journaling and RTG, or random table generation, being among them. If you've ever heard of For Against Darkness, for instance. That's an RTG. You roll on a table, you get the result, and then you build your adventure around that. Well, my method was more aimed towards people who own existing adventure modules and don't have a DM to actually read them before time and go through them, but just a fun little experiment in trying to play those adventures by yourself with some easy to learn mechanisms. Oh, these details look really good. I don't know if you can see this, but you're really getting to see that, like that plant right there, that organism that he's holding. Once that gnome oil seeps in, you really get to see every single detail that the sculptor put into it. And these sculpts, again, from Awaken Realms, fantastic. Really happy about them. I really like them. Yeah, so that's solo journaling. So those people may have expected the second video to be more about solo journaling. It's a very popular phenomenon now in the gaming community. Sorry, not solo journaling, solo role-playing games. Solo journaling is a form of solo role-playing, but it's one that where I found you're writing more than that you're playing, and also you still have no structure to your story. Like, the structure of your story is the structure you insert into it, which is fine. But sometimes you can make your own sandwich, so to speak, or you can have a professional deli make your sandwich for you and really enjoy that. And that's kind of the mentality that I went into when I made my own solo role-playing method. Was that I wanted to use existing modules and then play them. With some easy to learn mechanics, and yeah, it's just still get that feel that you're playing a role-playing game that you would normally have with a group and a DM. But now you have a better story, a story that is logical, monsters and events and locations that pop up not at random, but with purpose, and they all connect logically together. That's kind of the vibe that I was going for. And who knows what Story Tiles will do in its drafty kind of nature at the beginning, because these videos, they're all just kind of like shot really fast and loose, because I just wanted to get something out there while I'm working on the soundtrack for the channel, while I'm working on the logo, while I'm working on better production values. I just wanted to get some stuff out there because I have so many thoughts about story games. You wouldn't believe it. So it's a whole different variety of things that I wanted to talk about, and painting miniatures is one of them. A great joy of painting miniatures. Now, I'm going to let these dry, and I'm going to come back and we're going to do some highlighting, because right now they're really, really dark. And they definitely do not resemble the peppy colors that go with the sections of ISS Vanguard. So yeah, we are going to come back when these are all dry, and then we're going to apply some highlighting color, and hopefully then you will have your finished product. So now we're going to go into the final step of painting these miniatures, which is highlighting. Highlighting is basically the same as base painting. You have your palette and you have your paints, and all you're doing, if you're doing it in the very quick and easy manner, is you're taking a little bit of paint on your brush, you're wiping most of it off, and then you're just raking it across the raised areas of the miniature. This will, in theory, put paint on the raised areas, but refrain from putting paint into the recessed areas. Now, key to this is the fluidity of the paint. Now, you don't want, like regular painting, to be using a copious amounts of medium or watering it down with water. In fact, you don't want to do any of that. You want to keep it actually as dry as possible. Now this is where the wet palette does not come in handy, because the wet palette obviously keeps things wet, and the longer you keep your paints in the wet palette, and they've been in there now for several hours, the more fluid the paint becomes, and then you just get streaky results. And that's not what you want, obviously. You want as dry as possible. So I put a little bit of white paint, just pure white paint, onto this plastic palette, and all I'm going to do right now, and in fact, I put it on a plastic palette, but you can now at this point put it on like a cardboard underground, because if the moisture gets drained from that paint quickly, the better, really. And what we're now going to do is we're going to try and match the color of the miniature up to the color of the washer, which is the exact color of the card, the section, sorry, that the miniature is going to be representing. Now, in order to do that, I am going to grab still a little bit of that typical paint that we used for the miniature in the first instance. I'm just going to put it on my wet palette, and I'm just going to mix some white through it to get a much lighter type of yellow. Maybe a little bit more yellow. Now this is still way too wet, and we have way too much paint on our brush. So what I always do is I just wipe it off onto the cardboard on the ground, get most of it off. In fact, if there's still too much left on it, I might actually just go to like a cloth. And now I don't use the same cloth that I use to dry my brushes. It may look as if I've used it, but I use a different cloth because this is where like paint gets quite liberally deposited on. Now, and then with ever so light a stroke, I just rake it across the mini, bringing out those highlights. And you can see already the difference between the front and the back. The back I obviously spray painted with white, much more so than the front when I primed it. And so it's going to show up like that in the final highlighting. Now note that as I go into lighter areas, I may actually not wipe it off as much, because now I don't mind having more paint on there, on the brush. And I just keep doing this until I'm actually quite satisfied. I might lighten it up a little bit, just to get really, you can see the difference here, the highlights on top. And this is what typically would give you the Sundrop process that Awaken Realms typically uses. All right, so now, let's see, does it look, see, this is much more richer than this. That's okay, I'm gonna let it dry a little bit. I'm gonna maybe come back to it in a bit. I'm just gonna do the other one for now. Because I find like consistency is very important as well. Like even if it doesn't exactly yield the results that you want, I find it more important to have consistent results across the miniatures that belong to each other color-wise, but also just in style, than getting it just right. So, this is coming out quite nice. You can really see the details now. Now they're popping up a little bit more. Use a little bit more white just for the edges, the top, where typically light would shine if it were coming from the top. You could do the reverse. You can have light come from the bottom for a spookier effect. I do that typically with Lovecraftian monsters, or Arkham Horror miniatures or stuff. There you go. I still have to do the base, but I'm quickly going to do the other minis as well. Here I'm just going to stick to the pink because it is quite, maybe a little bit of red. Yeah, so here I'm discovering that there is a lot of red that's still got trapped in a lot of places during the inking phase or the washing phase. So that's why I'm trying to be a little bit more liberal with my paint application here, because otherwise it just looks too red, and I really want to go for that soft pink that Awaken Realms actually kind of likes. Their latest game, Awaken Realms Light, brought out Tamashi. It was full of really interesting purples and pinks. Oops. I did not back Tamashi, even though, funny enough, I came up with the name. And that was a weird story in itself. It was formerly called Gaijin, and that was not a good name for it. Had some negative connotations. And so they asked their fans what name they should use instead. Oops, I forgot to wash my brush. Always wash your brush. So anyway, a lot of names came up. Foreigner, Outlander, stuff like that. And I did some research, and I just happened to come by the name Tamashi. Not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, actually. But that is the Japanese word for soul. And I thought that was kind of appropriate for the game, because the game has you playing a cyberpunk kind of a character, and you're swapping bodies all the time. And when you do, your spirit or your soul basically gets transferred from body to body, but the body changes. And yeah, so I thought that was appropriate. I've submitted it. And yeah, I got the most votes. So Awaken Realms Light went with that name. And then I ended up not backing it. I wanted to back it. I actually like the game's premise. But as you will discover in story tiles, when this channel gets populated by more and more videos, is that I'm a big sucker for the story aspects of character, event, and locations in games. And I'm not saying that every game should have them, but if they do have it, if they do have like story or narrative in them, but more importantly, just a good distinction of character, locations, and events, then I'm in. Then that is a game that I can get interested in. And Tamashi just they had good characters. Awaken Realms always does good characters, but there was something about the locations that, I don't know, just didn't click with me. I mean, they're fine, but they weren't just for me. And so Ooh, that's a lot of blue. Gonna wiping that off. Yeah, because if at this stage you have too much paint on your brush, I want to say you can't go wrong, but yeah, you'll get a big fat blob on your miniature, and that is kind of hard to rectify at this point. So I just brush as lightly as possible. I don't really like push the brush in there. It may seem like I am, but this comes with just having done this method hundreds of times. I want to say I've done this method a lot. There's a lot of miniatures that just have hundreds in a box, and I'm just like, I'm no way going to paint all of these miniatures with the equal amount of detail that they probably deserve, but that I reserve typically just for like unique characters. If I have like mobs and mobs of monsters, then I'm way more likely to just do them in this method because they just need to stand out. They just need to be, not gray, I guess. But anyway, going back to Tamashii, yeah, Tamashii was just it was just not my type of game. But if I played it now, I would probably love it. Probably, and if I saw it in the store, I'd probably buy it too. I just, at that point in time, I did not back it. I probably had my eye on a few other games like Sleeping Gods 2 or Tidal Blades 2, which were either dungeon crawlers or adventure games with a lot more story to them. So you see that continuously I am dipping into the white paint, and I do that for consistency reasons as much as just getting a lighter variety of the exact same color that I'm using otherwise. And now you can really see like those details pop out. My camera can focus. Focus, camera, focus. I think I have it on manual focus, so I shouldn't hold it so high. But yeah, so now there's a lot more going on there. I'm going to do the bases and the starship, the ISS Vanguard itself, and then I think we're going to call it a day. I've done these really, really quickly, so please forgive the production values of this video because I really just wanted to share with people who have commented in the past that they really liked my work, because I often post my photos on Discord. I could put a link up in the notes. To an Imgur page. Imgur is a website that that hosts pictures, and you can make posts with a whole series of pictures. I think I've done a couple of those. I can put some links up to those. But really, what you see is what you're going to get, and it's just, like I said from the beginning, kind of impressionistic painted miniatures that resemble vaguely, probably, the artwork that they come from. The artwork in ISS Vanguard is, pardon the pun, but it's stellar. It really is. It's on par with what they did for Tainted Grail and for Etherfields. It's just, it's just part of the attraction is of playing a game like that is just looking at the artwork. It's just so beautiful. And so, painting miniatures is sort of a logical extension of enjoying that artwork. What I'm doing now is I'm just going to quickly go with a little bit of almost pure white just across some areas, just to give it like a little bit of a a sheen. It's not a real sheen. I could use metallic paint for that, but I'm trying to give the illusion that there's many, many different parts to this spaceship, because of course it's a big spaceship. This is not at the scale of the miniatures for obvious reasons. So you want to hold the interest of the eye by having lots and lots of little areas where your eye may wander off to as you're looking at it. There, I think it looks all right. I'm going to do the same with the bases. Now the bases I'm going to be a lot more rough, because the first of all, the colors that I put on there are pretty dark. They actually don't resemble as much the color scheme of the card anymore. Maybe a little bit to a certain degree, but let me show you at the back. So the back was like almost dark. So I wanted to be more like a play of light there. So I'm going pretty rough at it with the brush at this point. I'm not wiping too much paint off. I do like to leave the areas underneath the miniature in shadow where they are, because it also draws the eye upwards again towards the rest of the miniature. So this is pretty all right, I think. Yeah. All right, I'll just put it up there to know for myself that I'm finished with it. So you might think, okay, so the rocks, I get that they're gray or sort of like dark blue, but do the plants have to be dark blue? No, of course not. In fact, you can color these bases however colorful you want. I like it to do a little bit more stylistic, but there are people who just go to town on these miniatures and put all the colors of the rainbow in there. That's typically not my style. So for me, it doesn't have to look realistic. It just has to look interesting. And it's usually not a problem. The sculptors, they have done most of the work. I'm pretty much as the painter, just coloring in within the lines, even though it may seem like I'm not really actually coloring within the lines here. Yeah, like I'm saying, I'm going for a really impressionistic approach, trying not to win any awards here. I may have actually now added too much blue to it. See, that's what I mean with like consistency. You want it to be consistent, even if the colors are not exactly what you were looking for. Then just, it's better to make them all look the same, so that was done on purpose, rather than have mismatching bases that just give away that you've done these miniatures at a different time, and perhaps even with a different technique. I have a lot of miniatures that I collected for Descent 2nd edition, and I just never painted all of them, so I have to sometimes go back and just paint one or two, and this is like over a course of several years. So my techniques have changed. The process at which I do these things changed. I see now actually that this thing here, I don't know if you can see it. This thing right here actually belongs to the miniature. That is not a piece of the environment. But I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Like I said, no one picks up a miniature during mid-play and starts critically examining it, give positive or negative feedback. No one's going to do that. They're just too focused on playing the game itself. All right, we're almost done. All right. I apologize if the painting happens half the time off camera. Like I said, I get so absorbed into what I'm doing that I forget that I'm actually filming. That's no bueno. That's not part of the plan. I've put a little bit more white on here, which is actually something that I am going to do throughout. Like that's the final step of highlighting, really, if you wanted to go that far, is to, again, extremely gently brush just pure white, pure titanium white across your entirety of the miniature. The reason why I'm hesitant of saying that is because it can sometimes end up looking like you've got miniatures that went through a snowstorm. It would just be ugly because there's so much white on there. Having said that, that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. What you could do in warmer environments like fantasy dungeons is not use white, but use like a sort of offbeat of white. I have something here called Naples Yellow. And Naples Yellow it looks like white, but like compared to the tray, you can see that it's a little bit yellowish. And that is kind of more reminiscent of like natural lighting. If you have like a dungeon that you're going to go through and you know there's going to be torches and stuff, then that is a nice effect to sort of have, as opposed to the stark white. The stark white, however, is better for science fiction, simply because, actually even tried a little bit on the, see here, that's not bad. Yeah, why not? Why not? Paint a little cloud everywhere. All right, so I'm going to do the same with the miniatures, and I'm just really going to take off most of the white and just brush it really ever so slightly across the most jutting parts of the miniature. Like really not even spending more than 10 seconds on each. Not even re-dipping back into the paint, just using whatever flecks are left on the brush. And now you can see why my brushes get so frazzled, because I use these. I really, really use these to the fullest extent. My mother taught me from a young age to act normal. I was always acting silly. Still do, actually. It's not that I've learned that lesson so well, but part of that acting normal is that you take things at face value. You have a very no-nonsense way of looking at things in life, and one of the things that comes with that is using tools as tools, not, codifying, is that the word I'm looking for? I'm not sure. Sometimes certain English words actually escape me, but coddling, maybe that's the word I'm looking for. You don't want to coddle your tools. They're not your precious little collector's items. They're things to be used. And in fact, I extend that metaphor to the miniatures that I am now painting, because they are tools in my game. I will play a board game for the experience, and not to be a collector's piece or a museum piece of art on my shelf. I do find a lot of them to be at the equal level of art, but I don't treat them as such. So you'll never see me sleeving my cards. You'll never see me keeping board games in shrink. I use them as the things that they are, which are toys, luxury items, toys, and that comes with not spray painting or painting varnish onto my miniatures. Some people do this. They want to make sure that the paint never comes off, because of course if you move these boxes around and the miniatures are not secured in a vacuum tray or anything like that, then they could bang up against each other and then take off the paint. I don't really care about that. And I'm a person who moves his whole household to a different place, to a different country every few months. Sorry, not every few, did I say every few months? Every few years. Just because of the work that my wife and I do. Where the work goes, we kind of go with it. Take all my board games with me, and so they get banged up a lot. That's okay. That is perfectly okay. You know what else is okay? These miniatures. Okay, so they are not exactly like as colorful or as bubblegummy as maybe I set out for them to be. But yeah, these are the washers. Now this is the miniature. So you can see there's definitely a difference between them. This is definitely a more deeper blue than this. It's more of an air sky blue, but you know, it's okay. And you can still see the difference between the base and the miniature. The base is definitely more toned down in color. And let's see, the same goes for the yellow. The yellow is definitely a little bit more grimier, a little bit more dirty than this yellow. I like to think that is because of the wear and tear of things. However, ISS Vanguard is the odd game that actually tries to be a little bit like Star Trek. Everything's very shiny and new. So yeah, here too, the color is a little bit more reddish. It's a little bit more maybe purplish even. I'd say more reddish than the washer. The washer is definitely pink. And here's the final one. Oh, this is actually the closest yet. All right, and that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this this paint through. I will make one last shot just to show all of the miniatures a little bit more from a close-up. And I hope you'll join me next time, or otherwise in one of my other videos at Storytales. See you next time. Keep exploring.